All right, folks, here we go now. Um, no, I'm a little late to the game here, but we're going to talk about Jordan Peterson getting banned from Twitter and his little response video that he published post ban. So we're going to go ahead and play it, talk about it, see what kind of goofy excuses that he might have, or even legitimate ones that he might have for opposing this ban. But let me go ahead and play the video and we can take a look.
A few days ago, I penned an irritated tweet in response to one of the latest happenings on the increasingly heated culture war front. In response to the decision of an actor named Ellen Elliott Page, I am employing this awkward and impossible naming style because it is now apparently mandatory and am probably doing it wrong nonetheless.
So I'm not sure what quote unquote impossible naming style he's referring to. It looks like this actress who had transitioned into an actor from female to male. So we're talking Ellen Page to Elliot Page. Um, no, this person is known now as Elliot Page. I don't think that's impossible. It seems pretty simple. And considering that Jordan Peterson here has taught at Harvard University, I would think that this would be pretty easy for this guy to do.
As you're doing it wrong is the whole point of what is being made mandatory. But also, I'm trying to make a point. I've essentially been banned from Twitter as a consequence. I say banned, although technically I have been suspended. But the suspension will not be lifted unless I delete the hateful tweet in question, and I would rather die than do that. And hopefully it will not come to that, although who the hell knows in these increasingly strange days.
So you said hopefully it won't come to that. Is he suggesting that he will his death would happen and then he would suddenly become unsuspended from Twitter? Um, I don't know. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But let's see what else he says here.
What was it that I said that caused such a fuss? And that fuss is just beginning. And even more importantly and complexly, what exactly was it that I said that resulted in the ban? Here is the tweet in question. Remember when pride was a sin? And Ellen Page just had her breasts removed by a criminal physician. And then a link to a story that detailed out the happenings. The response from Twitter, quote, violating our rules against hateful conduct. You may not promote violence against, threaten, or harass other people on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious affiliation, age, disability, or serious disease. By clicking delete, you acknowledge that your tweet violated the Twitter rules. Delete. If you think we've made a mistake, submit an appeal to us. Please note that should you do so, your account will remain locked while we review your appeal. Let's take this apart. First, it is clearly the case that I did not promote violence against or threaten anyone.
All right, so that's pretty reasonable. I don't see anything violent, threatening violence. He's pretty much correct there. So let's continue.
With my missive. So that leaves the arguably lesser sin of harass. Let's assume, since I wasn't informed, that that was the crime. And further, harassment on the basis of so-called gender identity, since Twitter did not do me the favor of actually specifying my crime, and there are many possibilities on that front. We unfortunately have to guess at why this has occurred, and that's actually a big problem in and of itself, and also indicative of the utter carelessness of the Twitter organization with regard to the propriety of its own censorial actions.
To be honest, I think he has a feeling that he does know why he was suspended. This will be apparent later on, especially when he starts to get logically inconsistent about a couple of the things that he says. So here's what everybody knows, I guess, except Jordan Peterson, that there are particular utterances that are pretty much banned from Twitter. One thing is, I know you can't call somebody the N word. While it's not explicit there in the rules itself, you can logically get to the conclusion that racial slurs are not permitted. So that's pretty easy to work out there. I guess where Peterson has trouble is equivalent phrases that are equivalent to racial slurs. So we do know that there are many homophobic slurs in reference to gay people. I'm not going to repeat any of those there. And there are specific slur type utterances for those that are transgender. There are direct slurs towards transgenderism, and then there's kind of utterances that have the same effect, which would be misgendering, or I guess referring to somebody's dead name. These might be difficult concepts for a boomer to understand. I understand. I'm a 40-year-old dude, but it's hard for me to say, "Hey, I'm not trans." So I don't know what kind of utterances have the equivalent of someone calling me the N word. Um, so I know there's kind of a social debate about the issue, but I think Twitter has been pretty plain on that, the whole dead naming and misgendering. So typically, if you do misgender somebody, you're given the opportunity to delete the tweet. Um, but that's here nor there. We'll go ahead and continue on here.
I should at least know exactly what I did wrong if I am required to acknowledge that my tweet violated the Twitter rules. What rules, you sons of bitches? Exactly.
Okay, that's got to be my favorite part of this video. That's definitely a boomerism. You sons of bitches, like, come on. It's so memeable. I'm gonna probably in future videos, I am going to have a soundboard. I think I'm gonna clip that one for future use, folks.
Precisely. Because such things matter when the accusations start flying. So what did I say that might constitute harassment? Well, many things, hypothetically. Let's begin with, remember when pride was a sin? Although that is merely a factual statement, because under the old rules applicable even a decade ago, pride was a sin.
All right, so he says that pride is a sin is a factual statement. Is it? Because what is a sin? I think a sin is this something that's, I guess it's a not it's an objective thing that's in the Bible, but I don't know. I don't think this whole pride is a sin thing is part of why the reason he was banned or put on suspension. But even the type of pride that we're talking about when it comes to the LGBT folks isn't the same as the other type of pride. So I know the pride that we're talking about in the biblical sense would be um, not like if you have an accomplishment, if you do not owe that accomplishment to God, then that could certainly be considered pride, and that could be a sin. So not everybody's a Christian. Nobody needs, it's almost like he's leveling this authoritarian Judeo-Christian rule set on everybody, and if they do not follow it, they get his ire. So I don't know why him like bringing this whole pride issue up is irrelevant, really, at all. And then when we're talking about pride, I think it's just he starts to make semantic arguments. So the pride is that, hey, you have these groups that were um, historically oppressed by society because of, certain identities that they hold. So we're talking about, gay people. So what they're saying is, hey, I don't need to be ashamed of this. That's basically what the pride movement is about, is not having to be ashamed about themselves.
And had been recognized as perhaps the cardinal sin for thousands of years previously. It still might be regarded as unacceptable.
Yeah, because I'm not super well versed in the Bible, but isn't being gay a sin? Like, this is why I think this whole pride as a sin argument is fairly ridiculous. Um, it's just stupid.
To the woke authoritarian moralists who now insist, for example, that we celebrate Pride Month. No.
Yeah, this is funny because he's mentioning woke authoritarian moralists, and we have him moralizing here, um, which is weird. So the only reason his moralization is not as isn't authoritarian is because he has no power to do anything about his, you know, living his moral superiority over people. If he had if he was the owner of Twitter, what would he do? I know. Would he be an authoritarian? Hmm. Doesn't seem like he cares about the liberty of trans folks, as we'll get to later in this video.
Not hour or day or week, but month, and to have literally called it Pride Month instead of LGBT plus month or whatever else alphabet acronym which is currently insisted upon as the only acceptable enlightened terminology.
Yeah, so yeah, he's trying to make some semantic arguments. It's just like the same type of arguments that people would make against BLM, all lives matter, that type of BS. Anyway, let's continue.
I don't regard pride as a virtue. It has been classically regarded as a sin. I don't see that sexual orientation or sexual desire of any sort is something to celebrate or to take pride in.
So yeah, here's where he's getting it twisted. It's about being proud about who you are, not necessarily about the act of being homosexual itself. It's hey, American society has repressed, oppressed, whatever you ever want to say, gay people for quite a while. And they're just celebrating that they are happy that they can be themselves.
And so what I said was merely a fact. Now, it's possible that I hurt someone's feelings because I pointed out that pride goes before, for example, a fall, but I don't care about that, would do it again. And also consider it my duty to warn those who are about to fall into a pit that the path they are on leads suddenly downhill. But that was probably not the reason that I was banned from Twitter, although, as I said, I am in the position of having to guess. Next phrase to interrogate. And Ellen Page.
He is dead naming
Now, why did I
again.
stop there? Because in all likelihood, it was this seemingly innocuous phrase, including the name of a well-known actress, there I'm in trouble again, that likely resulted in my ban. I committed the fatal crime of what has come to be known in the appalling sensorial terminology of the insane activists as dead naming.
Um, yeah, it's sensorial activists. Um, okay, yeah. I guess if an activist had said that the N word is something pretty unacceptable to say, I'm pretty sure you would agree with him, Peterson. It's basically the same thing for trans people. Like, I don't know how else I can say this, but this is kind of typical of people who are a little bit behind the times. Like, I know there are some terms that I think are quite ridiculous, like Latinx and stuff like that. But I think amongst trans people, it's pretty unanimous that they do not like to be referred to the names and pronouns that they used to possess before transition. Um, I don't know. Maybe you need to talk to some trans people, Jordan. Perhaps they can shed some light on this for you.
Which is the act of referring to someone who has transitioned, another hated piece of jargon and slogan, by the name and by the inference.
So transition, that's a piece of jargon. Like what would you call it? We got to use words and language to describe something. Do you have like another name for this, Jordan Peterson?
The gender, really the sex, that everyone knew them by previously, and in the case of Ellen/Elliot, that millions of people recognized and knew. So I should have either called him, her, they, Elliot, instead of Ellen, although, as we will discover, that would have made it impossible for me to say what I wanted to and need to say in the remaining phrases. Not that such a problem would bother those who are objecting to my speech in the first place. The next phrase is...
Yeah, I don't know how this would make it impossible. And we can also see here he's still not referring to Elliot Page with Elliot's preferred pronouns. I'm pretty sure he knows what those are, but he won't use them.
Just had her breasts removed. This bit suffers from a very similar problem.
No, it doesn't. Men also have breasts. I didn't know if you didn't know that. They're not like women's breasts, but we still have them. Men can get breast cancer. We typically don't refer to them as breasts, but they are breasts. That's what it is. Like a chicken doesn't have titties, but that section of meat that we eat is called a breast. Um, You know, come on. That's not that hard.
I employed the forbidden pronoun her when Elliot, Ellen, is now to be regarded as a he or else. But there's a conundrum here, to say the least, and not just for me, although I have been banned because of it. Was Elliot slash Ellen a she or a he or Ellen or Elliot when she or he or they, that's Elliot or Elian, by the way, had his or her or their breasts removed? If he
It's not that hard a concept, Jordan. It's just he now. It's just Elliot now. Um, that's it. Elliot had his breast removed. Come on, it's not that difficult.
or she was a he, then why was it necessary to have the mastectomy? And how could those I'm writing to make sense of what I was saying if it was his breasts that were removed? Were those male breasts or female breasts?
Does it matter if they were male breasts or female breasts? Like, who gives a fuck, man? Like, seriously. Um, I don't know. He's just getting too caught up in the semantic and weeds in this shit. This is getting really ridiculous. Come on, Jordan.
That were removed? If they were male breasts, then why were they removed?
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why they were removed, Jordan. Oh man, if someone wanted to remove their ear, whether they're male or female, doesn't fucking matter. Uh, if someone wanted to remove their eyebrow, doesn't matter whether they're male or female, does it? You know, did they remove their male eyebrow or their female eyebrow? It doesn't fucking matter.
If they were female breasts and had therefore become objectionable to the degree that surgery generally reserved for cancer treatment was required, was morally obligatory, then wasn't Elliot still Ellen and he still she?
No, it is not the breasts that define that. Like, it's not like as if once the breast gets chopped off, they become their preferred gender. You, from what I understand, a trans person can have the complete anatomy of the sex that they don't prefer and still be considered a trans person of the other gender. It's You seem to be very confused, Jordan. I thought you, after years of um, getting famous because of these topics, you would kind of understand this stuff by now.
How could I possibly have written that sentence in any sensible manner whatsoever, while simultaneously making my point understandably and not breaking Twitter rules against so called hateful conduct?
Very easily. You basically could have just said Elliot Page got his breast removed by a criminal doctor. If you said that, you wouldn't have gotten banned.
And Elliot Page just had his breasts removed?
Yes, exactly.
Was he Elliot then? When exactly? Exactly. He was definitely Ellen at some point in the past, or so indicate all his, her, them, their film
Yeah,
credits.
he's getting
But
really
all those have
confused
to be
again.
reshot since they employed the hated dead name. That doesn't exist, by the way, that dead name category, except in this sensorial and
So he's saying this category doesn't exist. I believe Jordan Peterson should know about the concept of social construct. Um, just saying something doesn't exist, like, oh, the dead name doesn't exist. Okay, well, that's ridiculous. You could say all kinds of things don't exist. It's an idea. Like the N word isn't a physical manifestation. It's an idea You know how I know it's an idea? Because the Irish were called the N word at a point in our history in the United States. The Jewish were called the N word in the history of the United States. It's not that difficult to figure out what a social construct is, Jordan Peterson.
Addled minds of a tiny fraction of insanely narcissistic and increasingly dangerous trans activists. When precisely was it incumbent on me to switch my terminology in regard to Elliot/Ellen so that I was not engaging in hateful conduct?
Anytime they're publicly known. So if Elliot is publicly known as Elliot, then you shouldn't have known that. If you didn't know it, hey, you could chalk it up to not knowing. There's that. And you could have just done something like that if you want to. It's not a big deal, man. Like, come on. It's like my local football team is now called the Commanders. Am I going to call them the Redskins? No, they're the Commanders now.
And how can I describe the fact that someone who was once a woman, and really still is, had her breasts cut off?
Wow, and really still is. I think he's one of those guys that's like trans people don't exist type of person. That's a pretty mean thing to say there, Jordan.
Because she, he, they, their, them had fallen prey to a viciously harmful fad without using the appropriate sex-linked pronoun and the real...
Well, I don't know why he's calling it a fad. I believe transgender people have existed throughout history. It's not something that has just popped up only now. Weird.
Real name of the real person to whom this was really done with his, her, their voluntary but unfortunate acquiescence.
Like, what does he mean by real person? Is he saying that Elliot Page isn't a real person? Well, if they legally change their name to Elliot, are they always going to be referred to the name before the change? That you can't change your name? Is that something that he's advocating here? Like, what happens when you get married and your last name changes? Like, come on, man.
And so it was impossible to communicate what had happened to my audience without apparently running afoul of the impossible and absurd rules that now hypothetically govern morality itself in the days of the degenerated postmodern and Marxist ethos that we must still, no matter how impossible it is, abide by, or else. And you might object, Ellen/Elliot is an adult, 30-something, and fully capable of making up his, her, their own mind.
See, he's still confused
About such things, and she, he, they are welcome from the liberal and the libertarian position to go to hell in a handbasket as she, he, they see fit. And fair enough to some degree. But I don't believe it is either merely picayune or inappropriate to point out that Ellen/Elliot, who is quite a good actor/actress, is also a ritual model for emulation, being a star with all the privileges and, let us point out, the responsibilities that go along with that. So by acquiescing to this surgery and by...
All right, so he's saying that this person is a role model. Okay, that's fine. Is Jordan Peterson a role model? I don't want to talk about his addiction issues, but come on, man. People are human.
Publicizing it by insisting upon the sanctity and the moral virtue of his, her, their new, expensive, dangerous, and medically enhanced identity, and by participating in the whole identity charade, Ellen/Elliot has undoubtedly, with his, her, their so-called her...
All right, so when people get medical augmentations, is he railing against like all the people who get like plastic surgery and shit like that? Like, why is he singling out trans people as being particularly dangerous and not people who get fake tits and asses and all of that? Like, if I know if he knew, if he was looking at a Sports Illustrated and he saw a hot model with augmented breasts, he probably wouldn't say a goddamn thing about it.
Courage, and remember, the White House itself has tweeted out every indication of believing in the courage of those who transition, enticed many a poor, confused adolescent, girl most likely, to blame her emergent pubescent self-consciousness, confusion, and discomfort on being born in the wrong body, and believing that the courageous, self-affirming, and morally admirable route is hormonal treatment, sterilization, subjugation to a lifetime of expensive medical complication. How delightfully profitable is that? And misery. And I believe firmly that Ellen/Elliot, or whatever the hell her name or his name is, bears.
I wonder if he says the same shit about people who take HGH to work out. Like, talking about hormonal treatments and shit. Like, does he have the same view concerning Joe Rogan, who does take HGH and steroidal hormonal treatments? He does see an endocrinologist. Like, it seems like he only has this issue when females are taking male hormones and males are taking female hormones, but he has no issue when, you know, young males might be experimenting with their hormones and fucking it up on their own. Um, People who abuse steroids can seriously fuck up their hormonal system. Probably much worse than someone who's transgender, because a lot of people who are on steroids, um, since they're pretty much illegal, you have to get your stuff monitored, you know, outside of the normal means.
Moral culpability for that.
I'm just going to speed him up a little bit.
With regard to the final phrase, criminal physician, I must say that I've had some post-coital, so to speak, regrets about that phrase. It is clearly the case that the surgical operation performed by the butchers who butchered Elliot/Ellen was legal. So, was it criminal?
Butchers.
Or not?
So is every plastic surgeon a butcher?
Undertaken by the fascist physicians who carried out the Nazi medical experiments legal? Yes, under the laws of the time. But were they criminal? I'll leave that question up to you to answer.
No. Well, you were talking about the Nazis. It's like a false equivalency. The Nazis forcibly did these surgeries on people against their will. Elliot Page is an adult with their own agency who wanted to get this surgery of their own volition. Not every trans person gets this surgery. So I don't know what this guy's going on about.
Perhaps it might be objected, what about the damage done by hypothetically leaving those confused about their identity to dwell in their confusion? Aren't we morally obliged to intervene? And I would say, no. Why? Well, first, do no harm, as the Hippocratic Oath, remember that, insists. And second, it has been a matter of historical consensus that sins of omission are less egregious than sins of commission. Thus, leaving someone with gender dysphoria, no matter how warranted, and perhaps it is in a very tiny minority of truly unfortunate cases, to suffer the consequences of the theoretical mismatch between soul and body is less of a risk ethically, personally, socially, and philosophically than the extremely active intervention that constitutes so-called gender-confirming, another hated phrase, surgery. I might also
hated by you,
that the trans surgery enterprise is now a $300 million per annum growth industry. Rate of projected expansion, 15% per year. Projected increase by 2027 to $750 million per year. An expanding enterprise in a time of global uncertainty. Time to invest, both in the requisite surgical skills and perhaps in any industry associated with this vicious and unconscionable fad. primarily entangling, as such things so often do, the youthful and female. Isn't that a concern, intersectionalists? Not when push comes to shove or ideology to scalpel. Is that not a true moral hazard? And I'm not taking down that tweet or acknowledging that my tweet violated the Twitter rules. Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who. Twitter's a rat hole in the final analysis, and I have probably contributed to that while trying to use, understand, and master that horrible, toxic platform. No doubt I owe some apologies for that, and I'm trying to learn, but it's a relief in some real sense to be banned, and I regard it under the present conditions as a badge of honor.
Daily Wire. Yes, a Daily Wire ad right at the end of that. Oh, man. I'm going to show you guys something.
I was raised by a mother who was a teacher of social work in the 1970s.
What is going on? Okay. So I'm going to show you guys something. It's just kind of a past Jordan Peterson where he talks to a trans person. And I don't know what's happened to Peterson. He's definitely become radicalized. He was much more reasonable in the past. But I'm going to go ahead and play something else for you guys just in this, and then we'll wrap it up here. So I'm going to pause a video and then show you something real quick. All right, so I don't know why it's so hard to pause a video here. Okay, here we go. So this is an interview 2016 of Jordan Peterson, and there was actually a trans woman on this panel, and I just wanted to show you something real quick because it's pretty interesting. So let me share this video and I'll play it. Hopefully I'm at the right section.
Firstly, I have a lot of sympathy for people who want to be referred to by their pronouns. Obviously, as a trans woman, I know what it feels like to be misgendered and whatnot. And most people are reasonable in the sense that they would be reasonable enough to accommodate trans people and their preferred pronouns. And I'm sure, I mean, I would hope that if I were a student of Dr. Peterson, that he would refer to me as she and wouldn't have a problem with that. But at the end of the day, you know, a personal pronoun preference still is a preference for what language other people use. And at the end of the day, I don't have ultimate control over what Dr. Peterson, what the language he chooses to use, or anybody else for that matters. That's up to them.
Okay, let me find out then.
Arises,
let me find out. If she were a student of yours, what would you call her?
She.
You would. Okay. We've established that.
All right. So as we could see, Peterson used to be much more reasonable. I can use some of her same arguments that she was saying there. So just saying, as somebody who's Black, ultimately, I don't have control over people who use the N-word. In my country, I have no legal recourse against anybody if they were going to come up and say that to me. But also, I think Peterson would agree that using the N-word is pretty much unacceptable. And it sounds like for trans people, a misgendering is not something they like. And it seems to be, you know, within the same vein. So I don't know why it's so tough for Jordan. Come on, guy. But anyway, we've been talking about this for a while, and I will sign off on you for today. I might be doing a little bit more hot takes maybe next week. Depends on what happens. But everybody, you take it easy. Please like and subscribe here. And thank you for watching. You have a great day. Bye-bye.